Hey guys, welcome to an episode of GC Talks. I'm David Villa. I'm excited to interview my friend, Jere Stille. Today, I believe that this will be a huge impact for you. He's going to share a little bit of his testimony, what he does, pouring into the life of business leaders as well. Former CFO of Boeing. This man is a wealth of knowledge. Stay tuned. Check this episode out. All right, today's guest is a leader who's navigated billion-dollar boardrooms, battled life-threatening illness, and now devotes his life to transforming the next generation through purpose-driven leadership. Jere Stille is the former CFO of Boeing, South Carolina, now serves as the Chief Operating Officer of Meeting Street Schools, an innovative education network making generational impact. With 26 years of senior leadership at a Fortune 100 company, Jere has led massive operational transformations, built high-performing teams at scale, but his story doesn't stop at business success. From surviving stage 4 cancer, we're going to get into that, to launching and authoring the powerful book, When Left Turns Go Right. Jere is proof that setbacks can become setups for divine purpose. Whether he's mentoring leaders, speaking at conferences, or building systems for impact, Jere brings the rare blend of strategic insight and unwavering faith. I have a privilege of having him in studio today. Great treat. He flew down for this. So Jere, man, I really appreciate you coming into Tampa, and I've been looking forward to this ever since you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, originally on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so kind of want to dive into it, man, a little bit. Tell us, you had this, which is so cool to hear stories. I mean, our listeners, a lot of them are in the marketplace and are kingdom business leaders and owners. And you have this mix, where you've done both, and kind of starting where you were with Boeing, obviously, at a huge company, running major teams. Tell us a little bit about when that started and how you got into that, and where your journey started.
Yeah, happy to, Dave. First of all, thanks for the invite. I'm so glad to be here, and just getting a chance to be connected with you. And the ministry that you're doing today and your team is powerful, and that's really what I think brought us together in this.
Absolutely.
Boeing is a very interesting story, and quite honestly, there's many times in my 26-year career I thought, like, how in the heck did I end up here?
Right.
It didn't start there. In fact, my bride, going on 28 years, married with Julia. When we first started dating, she made it very clear about kind of expectations, no debt, we're gonna, pay for our wedding. And so she just had these kind of amazing goals and stuff. I was working in the retail business for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. If you've ever worked in the retail business, these are 80, 90-hour weeks. You typically work weekends and stuff. I was in management. Newly married and wanted to stay married. And so I was quickly wise to start thinking, is there something else? And quite honestly, I was doing really well in the retail business, worked for a company called Smart and Final. They're retail out in California, like a Costco. Had a great, I would say, success opportunity for me to grow in a senior level role if I had stayed with them. But I had this nudge that God was just calling me to go a different direction. So I took this crazy decision to take a 2/3 cut in pay and start over. I did not have a 4-year degree, and Boeing gave me a chance to walk in. Here's the catch, though. They said, hey, we've got an opportunity for you. It's an entry-level position. The job goes away in a year. Do you want it? We need to help transition some of this payroll stuff. Boeing had just bought Rockwell, and I said, I'll take it. And so, long story short, I stepped out in this faith. It's in the book that you'll talk about a little bit later, but when I learned that stepping out of faith, that God really is just the orchestrator of kind of our steps, if you will. And so I landed myself in this job running payroll and help transitioning it. And there's just some amazing stories, Dave, that took place here. But my career, one of the first things that I did when I started, I was 28 years old, and I went and sought out a leader in the business. His name was Jim Sherry. He was the CFO of one of the businesses. I said, Jim, help me understand, how do you navigate your career here? He says, okay, let's spend some time. And he drew this whiteboard, drew this pyramid on a whiteboard. And he says, what's your dream job? And I said, well, actually, I want to be CFO of one of the businesses. And he says, I'm glad you can answer that, because most people, when you ask that question, they're like, I don't know. he says, you got to pick something. So he drew this pyramid, and he said at the top is the CFO, but let's just dice up this pyramid. We'll create some vertical lines and some horizontal lines. And at the bottom, this is an entry-level position. But these vertical lines says, in finance, you have a lot of different types of disciplines: accounting, rate management, contracts, pricing, et cetera. He said, and so those are all different experiences. He says, but if you take that pyramid and you think about the business, I'll make it simple. There's defense, commercial, and services. And then there's functions: engineering, HR, quality, all different types. He says, the person at the top, what do you think they need to know to be really well? I said, actually everything. He said, exactly. He says, some will tell you to chase a career, go vertical, become a CPA, and work your way up and become some finance expert. He says, I would argue, go chase the experience, and you'll be better suited off. When I hired into Boeing, I started, they had this amazing benefits program. I could go to school during the day to finish up my 4-year degree. And so they ended up paying for my undergrad at private university, went to Pepperdine for my MBA, and then sent me to Harvard Business School for a period of my career. And I chased these different experiences. So as I navigated, Dave, I went through accounting, engineering, facilities, asset management. And every time I was leaving a role, my boss at the time would say, why do you want to go over there? Don't you want to be a CFO one day? Don't you know the only way to become a CFO is to stay right here and work your way up? I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So this crazy navigation map that I had chased these experiences. And what I learned is that the journey that I went on is I started learning from people that were around me. I chased the degree. I was able to get that taken care of. But I learned more from the people I worked with and the organizations that I was with. And I think God had a hand in all those doors that had opened, but it led me through the defense side of the business, engineering. It eventually led me into Chicago, working for the HR leader for the Boeing company. And that was the first job that my career changed. So I'm working for the head of the HR for the Boeing company. He worked for the chairman and CEO. And in that space, I got to work in Chicago and really start to spend time with the top leaders in the company and learn how they made decisions, learn about how they thought at the time a Fortune 7 company thought about how they would be successful, not today, but 100 years from now. And I used to have this phrase that I used to say, every day was like an MBA, because I would learn and I would take notes. And then an opportunity came, and our CFO said, hey, I've got an opportunity for you to go lead some international finance strategy. And I got a chance to go bring on a team and some consultants. And that just navigated this amazing career that led to a CFO role on the services side and the commercial side, and eventually led on to what was the 787 program, my first executive role. I was just very successful in those roles that I had. Eventually it led me to a CFO role in South Carolina.
So I'm listening to you, and it's interesting. So you were a believer. You were saved at this time?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, my journey, it starts back really at 19. I grew up in a really rough environment, a single parent. I'm one of 4, the youngest. There's myself, there's Melanie, there's Robin, and there's Don, and we're all about 3 or 4 years apart. Melanie is autistic, can't do anything without a human helping her. And I saw my mom as a kid really struggling, working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. And one of the things that happened when we were young was to make ends meet, my mom couldn't afford to have somebody watch our kids, her kids. And so one of the clever ways that she was able to do that is that she could trade a room in the house for board if you watch my sister Melanie and I. Don and Robin were old enough to kind of be on their own. And that entered into my world just this tremendous amount of abuse and just trauma for both my sister and I. Growing up in that environment, it really affected me. And so by the time I was 19, I'd gone through the gamut of being on the streets, drugs, alcohol, just the gamut of things, just lost, didn't know God, didn't know anything. And I really just didn't want to live. Yeah. And there was this man in my life. It was my mom's boyfriend earlier years, and his name's Bill. And he was like the mentor that I needed. And he invited me to go to a program called the Landmark Forum, and it was a weekend event, similar like Tony Robbins, if you will. But what I learned from that Landmark Forum is I walked in on a Friday, and when I walked on Sunday, I realized that everything was a choice, including the story that I told myself. And it was that moment that I decided I was going to change my trajectory and that I wanted to live and I wanted to go be successful. My life was so dramatically transformed, and this is before God in my life, that it really shaped people around me. It says, like, what just happened to Jere? My mom, my dad, who they were divorced when I was a year old, my sisters all wanted to go to experience this. So they just saw something that transformed. But Dave, it's really interesting. You could be on fire and chasing things, but there's this inner void that was still there.
Yeah.
And I had this moment where I started asking, God, are you real? And as I sought that question, I decided I was going to go up to this church where I grew up, Catholic church, St. Gregory's Church, and decided I was going to show up on a Sunday. And I went in the back, and half the mass was in Spanish and half in English. And I just remember just being back and getting down on the tuffet and just kneeling down and just praying, God, if you're real, would you bring somebody in my life that could just help me understand who you were? Nothing happened, got up and left 2 weeks later. And then I ran into this girl at the gym, and her name was Julia, now my wife. And she says, hey, Jere, did you graduate high school? I was like, what kind of question is that? Like, but that was an appropriate question because that was the last time she saw me. Yeah. It was 7 years. I saw her when I was 14, and now 7 years later. And I said, yeah, I'm working in the grocery store, and I'm going to school part-time, trying to get my AA degree and stuff like that. Long story short, we went out to lunch, and she said, hey, she just started sharing about her faith and stuff. Long story short, I got invited to church, and it was that church where I got saved, and all of a sudden it just changed everything for me.
That's awesome, man. That's such a cool story. I want to go back to the experience you said where you went to work at a low level position or an entry position in Boeing, and go back to the gentleman that you said kind of took you and showed you this diagram and took some time with you. One of the things after listening to you comment on all of that growth is that you were pursuing success, you were pursuing growth, but you also, I couldn't help but notice, because my mind works this way. You were listening, you were taking notes, you were trying to learn, and so how important is that? And I think that's a process, because you in the beginning of that conversation, hey, where do you want to be? I'm going to be at the top of the pyramid, and here you are down here, and then with every move that you made, it seemed like that you never really lost focus of that. And then I guess the second part of that question is, how important do you feel having somebody like that gentleman in your life was at that time, that I guess mentored you, took the opportunity, because a lot of times people view that as, it's not worth my time, or maybe this could be a threat, this could be somebody that, but it seemed like those scenarios didn't happen with you. And, maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, Dave, first, I would say, this idea of listening, I often felt like I was the dumbest guy in the room. Being around some really smart people, highly educated, world changers, people that could walk into the White House, people that met with dignitaries, and I was just in the presence of them and learning. And I loved that position. Because I just would suck it up and just absorb and just really try to, think about. And I would take notes, and I'd go back, even at home, I would think about, like, why did they make that decision? Like, how were they thinking about things? How would I apply those things in my life as I was going? And so it wasn't like it was a homework assignment. It just became integrated to how just my entire life was thinking about from the age 19 moving forward, and just trying to continue to be intentional about my success and future. So that was really important. And then this idea, Dave, of mentorship is so important. I am so grateful for people that will take time out to teach and learn and make an impact in other people's lives, like you. quite honestly. And then you think about just
it cost you something, but it's I'd say it's probably, and I didn't always think this way. I remember my wife. It was not many years ago, because I'm more of a I feel like I gravitate more to the 1,000-foot view. I'm not a by nature a one-on-one guy. I like to cover a larger view.
Yeah.
And my wife said something to me, because I was just discontent, in a season just a few years ago. I was going through just a season of just felt like things were not satisfying.
Right.
Purpose had kind of waned a little bit. Right. She told me, she said, maybe you should consider pouring into individuals, one-on-one. She goes, that's not something that you've always done. You've avoided that. And it hit me. And I started opening myself up more to that. And it's actually become one of the most fulfilling things.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, was the turn that kind of got me thinking about a legacy. Like, what is this all really about? And so I agree with you there. Yeah. Let me ask you about in Boeing, and then we'll get into the book, and we'll get into, obviously what a great title, but it's so appropriate when left turns go right. Yeah. But at Boeing, a man of faith, growing even into the CFO position. Yeah. What part did faith, because this is a huge company, obviously a secular, just a secular company. Yeah, what part did faith play in your leadership? How did you navigate that?
I love the question, and I've been so deliberate, because I never walked in there with the belief that I got there on my own. Mm-hmm. Like, I was there because I listened to God's voice. I was driving down Beach Boulevard, and I heard God just say, "Trust me." And I remember being kind of new in my faith, and I kind of freaked out. I called my pastor. I'm like, "Hey,
what does this mean?
Does God talk to people?" And he's like, "I don't know. What did you hear?" And I'm like, "That's probably a good question to ask." Right. And then I told him. He says, "Oh yeah, that sounds like God." And so, when I stepped out in faith, I saw that he just did these things, and it's in the book. But you'll see, like, when we step out in faith, God just honors, and he just makes a way for things that are impossible in man's hands. So my intentionality was always to start with proclaiming not only my faith, but kind of how I lived my life. And so when I would adopt a new team that would come underneath me, or if I get moved to a new position, I would always start with, like, my 3 priorities. Let me just tell you about who I am. And my priorities are faith, family, and then work. I sometimes get those orders wrong, but that's my goal. But I don't think of it as an 8 to 5 job. Like, I'm a husband 24 hours a day. I'm a Christ follower 24 hours a day. And for work, it provides a means, and I'm here for so many reasons, and it's providing a means. So it's 24 hours a day. What I have to do is be able to balance this in a healthy way. Yeah. So that I'm not unbalanced.
I think that's where people miss it.
They really do.
And I think a lot of that. I think a lot of that is not really an intention, especially for Christ followers, for kingdom leaders. I think a lot of it is we're not taught, properly. Maybe we don't know how, and I think that's probably in my experience my biggest reason for having that out of balance. I was modeling what I saw, not and then didn't really have those people in my life. I did it the school of hard knocks way, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that gives us a platform to be able to share with others a better, right way to do it, that's more efficient and more effective.
Dave, here's something I would just add to. It's that what you can't substitute is effort and attitude. Mm-hmm. Like, those things are a requirement. And I would tell everybody that if you want to compete, my son's a baseball player. He's been playing since he's 5. He's 17 and a half. He's a senior. He's been playing on travel ball. He loves it. Sport. He's a catcher. And I would tell him, I said, "Son, like, when you're at the bat, when you're at the plate ready to bat, you need to determine where that ball is going to be hit before it ever leaves the pitcher's hand. Like, great things happen twice. First, in your mind. Mm-hmm. So you got to believe it before it happens. And if you do, you can be so intentional. Your chances of hitting that ball go skyrocket up. Yeah. And so this idea of effort has got to be just attitude, and you should be able to win on those 2 things at all times. So when I'm leading teams,
say that again real quick. So I want to. Yeah. You said it happens twice. What did you say?
It's one of my favorite quotes. Great things happen twice.
I love that.
But always first in your mind.
I love that.
So it's intentionality. It's believing it. It's like faith. You have to step out first for it to be experienced.
That's so good.
And so if you live in that world and that it's part of your DNA, who you are, then it comes out in every conversation I have with my teams. It's talking about this idea of saying like, gosh, like my whole focus is about intentionality. Like you can be better than you are today. You were created for more, you were created for better. And whatever that limit you have in your mind, my whole focus is like, how do I elevate that and get you to believe? Because if I can get you to believe that, then we'll work on the tools to get you there.
That's good. That's good. So true. So true. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously in the book and in your life, and it's it's so obvious that you were intentional. I think that's huge. Mindset, and I love the fact that you went to this event even pre-Christ, and it helped change your mindset or get you thinking bigger. Right. And then of course the Jesus comes in, right, and he gives us all the tools and he makes it possible. But there are multiple left turns, sure, small left turns that ended up going right, but there was a big one. And I want to kind of jump to that a little bit as well, with the illness. I'm sure that, not to coin a baseball, it came out of left field, right? So here you are. Where were you in your career? What was going on? And then, and then talk to us about how this news came.
So we've been married for about 6 years now, and we were just doing life. We're both working at Boeing, both in school. I was working on my master's at Pepperdine. I was doing a Master of Divinity at Biola. I was a youth pastor at the time and working 50, 60 hours a week, trying to do all those things at the same time because I just believe I could.
Right.
And so that was just the way I kind of drove and stuff. And so it was right around December, we get this time off during kind of holiday shutdown. And I traditionally get this annual cold, bronchitis, some type of, pneumonia sometimes. And I started feeling really not too well in the December timeframe. And I noticed this kind of lump that was sticking out over my left collarbone and stuff. And I thought, anything, I went into the doctor, doc in the box, and they took a quick x-ray, gave me some antibiotics, said, we'll see you next week. A couple days go by, and I noticed this has gotten bigger. And I thought, gosh, what the heck? This is weird. So I'm now kind of playing with it a little bit. And my wife's like, hey, what are you doing? Don't be touching that. You're going to make it worse and stuff. And I decided, gosh, I'm going to just maybe go back to the doctor and check it out. So I go back to the doctor, and he says, yeah, just keep taking your meds. Don't worry about it. A couple of days go by, and I have this horrible chest pain in my chest. And I'd stopped at the like an Office Depot to go pick up some supplies before going to school that night, and I thought I was having a heart attack. Now I was 33 at the time. I'm like, why would I be having a heart attack? But it was just so severe. It stopped me in my tracks. Lasted for about 20, 25 seconds, give or take, and then I just kind of got my breath back, left, sat in the car, and I thought, what was that? I called my pastor and said, hey, if I don't make it to school tonight, I just need you to pray right now. Just like, I don't want to call my wife and worry her and stuff like that. Called the doctor, and I asked, hey, did the blood work come back? He says, everything looks fine, don't worry about it. All of a sudden, the next morning, I had a bump over here coming on this side. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go back into the doctors again and go see him. They decided they were going to do another chest x-ray. I said, all right, they already took one. He goes, oh, okay, well, we won't do it. Gave me another antibiotic, says come back on Monday. And then that weekend, I had night sweats and we had just lost my father-in-law. He was 53, and so we kind of understood the pattern of these things. And I just thought, gosh, maybe I have cancer. And so Monday rolls around, I go into work, and I decide, okay, I'm going to go see the doctor. And I called Julie. I said, hey, do you want to meet me at the doctor's office? She says, I will. And I said, hey, I just need you to be prepared. I'm pretty sure I've got cancer. And she got upset. Like, why would you say that? You don't know anything. I said, I just need to be prepared for that news. And so went and saw the doctor. He decided to go ahead and take a chest x-ray. And he came back a few minutes later. He had this red pen. He circles this mass in my chest, just a huge mass. And he says, that looks like some type of lymphoma, but we're going to move stat. Like you're going to leave my office. We're going to go get you into an ENT. We're going to get you to do a CT scan. He says, they're going to tell you they can't get you in for 3 weeks. You need to tell them like it's happening like ASAP. And so that's exactly what happened. Went to the front desk, called the ENT's office. They said 3 weeks. I said, hey, they think I have cancer. She says, come in tomorrow at lunchtime. We'll fit you in. That was a long night. We drive to the ENT the next day, and so saw Dr. Yoshipi, and she downplayed it. Oh, you're going to be fine. And we tell exactly what the doctor says, and she says, well, we got to get you in the hospital. We're going to do this biopsy of some of the cells in there. And she says, it probably can't get you in for 3 days. And we said, gosh, is there anything you can do? Like 3 days? Like 3 days? Are you kidding me? And she says, hold on one second. Comes back. She goes, they can take you now if you leave the office. And so we're like, okay. So we got in the car, went across, and then did the procedure. And that was a long night. And the doctor says, hey, this takes about 2 or 3 days before you get results. And so now this is Tuesday. And we just trying to figure out, gosh, what's going to happen? Maybe it's not, maybe it is. And then on Wednesday rolls around, and I get this call from Dr. Cirilla's office. He's oncology, and from Maria. And Maria says, hi, I'm Maria from Dr. Cirilla's office. And you have an appointment with him tomorrow at 8 a.m. And I said, who is he? And she goes, well, he's an oncologist. I said, do I have cancer? She goes, oh, you haven't talked to anyone? She says, I can't disclose it. You need to talk with a doctor. We hung up, and I thought, Phone rang. It was Dr. Bland from the doc in the box. He says, hey, I just got the results. It looks like you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Dave, when he said those words, my knees buckled. Because I thought, like, you know how sometimes your brain translates a word? You hear one thing and it translates. All I heard was, you're going to die, when he said that. And I sat down, and I was like, oh, leukemia, like how's that even possible? And he said, well, I don't know, because we did all this blood work on you. It doesn't make sense, but I'm glad you're going to see the doctor tomorrow, and good luck, and call me if you need anything. Long night. Next morning, we go to see Dr. Cirilla, and have a caravan, my parents and siblings and our pastor. And one of the things that I noticed, Dave, was in the waiting room, there was a pamphlet that talked about people that are impacted by not being able to have kids. And so you could bank medically if you needed to do that. And so I'm thinking, like, we want kids. Like, I want to be able to. So we go back, we see Dr. Cirilla, and he's so good. And he just treats us very gently. And he just says, what do you know? And I told him everything I knew. And I said, I'm told I have acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And he says, not exactly. He says, it's like that. He says, you have acute lymphoblastic lymphoma. It's a leukemia in the lymph nodes and T cell. And he says, it's very rare and it's very aggressive. And I said, oh, okay. And he says, and we need to treat it now. I said, well, first of all, if I do the treatment, can I have kids? And he says, what we're gonna do, chances are, no. And I said, he says, there's no time. He says, we're going to start now. I said, what do you mean now? Like, he says, you're going to leave my office and we're going to start treatment now. I said, oh, no. Like I'm at work. I got my 2 master programs going on. I said, like, can we schedule this? He says, no, we're going to start now. So my wife was like, hey, I got his clothes packed. Let's go. And we got up and drove across the street and started. And that day, everything happened so fast, Dave. It just was so fast. And that night, your head's spinning. You're trying to figure everything out. The next morning, I go down for surgery. They do bone marrow. They take a piece of the hip bone and doing extractions. I go down for surgery. And I'm just exhausted from the day of all the activities that went on. And that night, and the nurse walks in. She's got these chemical gloves on and this red bag of chemo, and she says, hey, this is going to be your first treatment, and this is very toxic, and I'm just going to tell you, when you urinate, do not splash on yourself, because like you need to wash it off and stuff. And I'm like, you're putting that in me? That makes no sense. And my wife's like, time out, stop. I mean, he's not taking it. And she's like, no, we have to do this. She says, I don't care. She goes, he's had enough. We're not doing it. She goes, ma'am, I have to get Dr. Cirilla on the phone. She goes, put him on the phone. So I'm staying out of this. Like, let them handle it. And so she walks out, comes back a few minutes later, and I saw this look in her eyes. Didn't have to say anything. I knew. And she says, hook him up.
Wow.
So that was my first chemo. The next morning, Dr. Stille comes in and I said, hey, listen, give it to me straight. He's like, well, I said, like, how much time do I have if this doesn't work? He says, we're going to throw everything at it. And I said, but I understand that, but like, how much time do I have if this doesn't work? And he says, you have 5 to 7 days.
Oh my goodness.
So the size of this mass had grew in 2 weeks. It was the size of a football stick in my chest, and it was pushing. It was collapsing my lungs and my esophagus and pushing on my heart. I didn't realize it. It was just so fast. And the hope was that this would work. And I asked Dr. Stille, I said, hey, would you do me a favor? Would you put me in touch with just somebody who's beaten this cancer? Because I just need some encouragement. And he says, I cannot.
Wow.
I said, okay, I got it in your office, but can you just go beyond your office and like maybe somewhere broader? He says, I cannot. I said, like anywhere. He says, I cannot. And I was like, oh man, it was such a rare cancer. And so Dave, this was just an incredible moment for me. Now, I'm a man of faith. I'm a youth pastor and stuff. And I'm thinking like, God, like there's some stories I touch on in there, like, one of which is, why is me? Why me? Which God just straightened me out on that answer. But let me tell you a beautiful story in this whole thing. A couple months had gone by in and out. A few times I almost died just because of the complications and blood transfusions and stuff. Somebody had given me this book by Lance Armstrong, and it's called It's Not About the Bike. And Lance Armstrong, being this world athlete, Tour de France multiple times and stuff, and it's his battle with testicular cancer. And so, like, I'm high intensity, man. I'm just always go, go, go. And I was like, I'm reading this, and I went, cover to cover. But Dave, there was this moment in the book where he talks about he got to bank, and because he banked, all of a sudden in the middle of the book, you see pictures of his son, and I was like, God, that's not fair. That is not fair, God. And I just. In life we do these dips and stuff, and I was just in this valley, and my wife saw it. So a couple of days go by, she says, listen, I'm just going to go book a massage for you. I'm like, whatever. A couple of days go by, I go to this place to get a massage that we would frequent and stuff. And the first thing I asked him, like, hey, my immune system's compromised. Your technician cannot be like sick. And so like, hey, no problem, what's going on? I said, I've got cancer in front. Well, what kind of cancer do you have? I said, acute lymphoblastic lymphoma, T-cell, it's really rare. And she says, wow, I'm so sorry. And this only other person sitting in the room at that time stands up and walks over, and she says, excuse me, sir. She goes, I'm so sorry. She goes, I would never do this, but did you say you have acute lymphoblastic lymphoma? I said, yeah, like, are you oncologist? She says, no, that's a very rare cancer. And I said, well, how would you know that? She says, my husband's a survivor. I said, are you kidding me? This man walks out, and it's her dad. And she goes, Dad, this is Jere. And he has the same cancer that Johnny has. Her husband's name's Johnny, same as her dad, John. He's like, wow, that's a very rare cancer. And she's like, hey, can we just pray for you? And I'm like, oh, can you pray for? Are you kidding me? Like, let's go. And so we hold hands, and I start telling him, I said, well, actually, I'm a youth pastor. She goes, whoa. My husband was a youth minister for a lot of years when we were younger. And I said, are you really? And she goes, where are you at? And I said, we're at a Foursquare church in Long Beach. And she just looks at Dad, and he looks with open eyes. And she says, my dad's visiting from Gumboro, Texas. He's a former retired pastor from Foursquare pastor. So now we know this is a divine appointment.
Right.
Like, this is just crazy.
Right.
So we hold hands, they pray. And I'm like, now, like, just lifted. I'm thinking, God, you are so good. I can't wait. So we get done praying. The person at the front's like, let's go, your massage here. And I start to walk away, and her dad says, hey, Jere. I turn around. He says, I don't know what the situation is with you and Julie, if you have kids or not. But Johnny and Casey were told they would never have kids. And they just gave birth to their baby boy, Jackson, 8 weeks ago.
Come on.
And
Wow.
And it was a miracle. They were on TV, this whole thing, and it was just incredible. So God had given me this kind of incredible moment. He saw where I was. Like, doctors couldn't put me in contact, yet this is how he works, and he does this. And I was like, man, God, if I can make it through this, then I can believe for a son. And I just need to get to a punchline. we believed, I made it through, and it was a fight, and we believed we could have kids, and we tried and unsuccessfully, and so we started trying to seek medical help, and while we tried to do that, my wife did get pregnant, and with twins, and we lost them at week 9.
Oh man!
And it just kind of ripped our heart out, and we're like, let's do it again. And we tried again, and she got pregnant one more time, and we lost it at 11 weeks. And we just said, okay, God, we're going to just stop. Like, maybe this isn't in our future, and we would just decide, career, ministry, whatever we're going to do. 6 months later, she got pregnant naturally. And he was born on my birthday. And so what God taught me through that says, listen, I'm going to give you a son, and it's not going to be through man's hands. It's not going to be through your efforts. It's going to be through mine. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to put my fingerprints on this. And that's why I'm going to give him to you on your birthday. I'm like, you can't make that stuff up. I'm just thinking, like, God, you are so good. And I came through the other side. So I had this promise. I said, God, I'm going to tell your story from now on. I'm going to live with intentionality about who you are. And our daughter's another miracle just the same way. And I'm just thinking, oh God, like I from this point forward, I realized that he didn't save me for me. He saved me for him.
Man, that's powerful. I mean, the questions at this point are out the window, and which is so perfect because, I had things down about which you've covered in a right turn thinking, that it's so much better to hear you just say it. There's not a doubt in my mind that this is just going to be transformational for someone, many people listening, because I mean, I just can't imagine that. But how powerful to see God's hand in all of that, in every bit of it. It's the doctor couldn't find someone, but yet you're in this appointment that you possibly weren't even going to go to, or was just a last minute type. Hey, let's get you this massage, and here's this person, and then the connections with the church and ministry and believers and praying, and then the word about children and so forth. That's just powerful, and I'm sure there's so much more, Jerry, to that, in that whole battle. But so you came out the other side of that, and I just want to, as we wrap this up in the next few here, I want to get into kind of where you are, because I mean where you are now allows you to share this to a different group of people. So you're now. When did you leave Boeing, and when did and then obviously started a nonprofit, and then I want to end once I hear that, I want to end with what you're doing, even with the men that you pour into with business, things like that, but talk a little bit about that transition as well.
Yeah, I knew I'd done this incredible career at Boeing, which I'm so grateful for, and the men and women that I got to work with are just like gold. They're just amazing. And but I knew this was a season. I knew I was getting to a point in time where I could retire. And what I didn't know if it was going to be on my time or somebody else's time to that. And Boeing's gone through a lot of challenges, and we had some changes at the top. And quite honestly, for a couple of years, I thought I was going to get plucked off, just like a lot of other great leaders, just because new leadership came in. I had a few things that I needed to accomplish since that CFO role. Led financial operations for all commercial, and then my last role was leading finance transformation for the company. I was one of 5 leaders that got to do that. Very tough assignment, which was also letting go of a lot of people and that whole thing, and it was tough. But I just wrestled with this idea of like, how long should I be here? And so I started thinking about this time about like, would I retire? What's this time? And that decision was made for me. They're like, hey, it's time. We're going to give you a package, and we're going to, so you can retire, but with a package and time. And I thought, okay, God, what are we going to do last summer? And I don't know what you're going to do. Like, what should I be doing? My kids are still young. I've got to still be able to, afford
And you're
college.
Still this guy that's a go-getter.
I'm this go-getter.
Yeah,
like, I'm not
can't-
going to say, like, I
retiring. You're not talking about like some old guy that's going to go lay on the beach.
That's right.
Yeah, you're just transitioning to another.
Yeah, this is like, what's the next thing? And there's just an incredible story during the last summer, but I got connected. Have you read the book Halftime?
Yes.
Such a good book. So it was a great time for me to read that book. I should have read it 10 years prior, but nonetheless, I read it, and it just started thinking about moving from success to significance. And I'm like, God, what would you have me do? All I know is I was on my knees every day at 4 a.m. praying and in the Word, and just really trying to think, okay, God, what will you do? And God put me in contact with, through a series of divine appointments, and I got connected with a gentleman named Ben Navarro. He's just an incredible, him and his family, incredible people in South Carolina. And they funded Meeting Street Schools, a nonprofit. And being connected with them, an opportunity came, and they said, hey, we're looking for a COO to help us run those schools. And I know this is way off your wheelhouse, but would you consider that? And I just thought, God, this is amazing. Like, I had this association as a young kid. It's why I got in youth ministry. And yet what the things that they're focused on is trying to provide top education for economically disadvantaged families that probably don't even, their parents never went to maybe finish high school, let alone go to college. But if you could change a child's life and get them through our program, through our schools, and then change their family and descendants from that point on.
I'm assuming that the drive for youth ministry or impacting young people, especially, in the area like disadvantage and came from that your late teenage years when you saw your mom and then
100%.
had that transformation.
100%. It became
you never lose
an
that.
identity. You don't lose it, and because the funny thing is, Dave, is I wake up every day seeing the same kid I was as this little kid in a very rough neighborhood, gangs, violence, drugs, the whole thing, and mom trying to just make ends meet,
hold it all together,
and just hold it all together and contribute and try to help her. Just all that responsibility as a young kid, and here's what I believe: like, we are created for a purpose.
Yeah. Like
this, and my purpose is to do what God's called me to do. And however he shows up in that way, and as long as I can honor, then I trust that he's going to bless that. And so I just live with this just intentionality of that focus.
So before we let people know how they can connect with you, get a hold of the book, which I'm assuming a lot of people are going to want to get a hold of this after just hearing a little bit of that story, how powerful that was. And just the fact that the message can instill faith in so many people, because we all experience those turns that they didn't look the way we thought they were going to look, And my experience with God is, regardless of how we're in the sphere that's obviously very serious, but it's always going to look different. The turns are always going to be God's turns, and my turns never looked the same. His were always better, but they never were my initial choice most of the time. But where you're impacting and where did this come in? Where how we met, was through through some investment that you make into just men leading businesses, and I know that that's part of what you do at the church you attend as well. So how did all that come about as well? Because now you're able to take your heart for men, your heart for ministry, your heart for business, your experience obviously in the executive world, and then help these guys. Yeah. And I talked to the one of the gentlemen that you connected me with on LinkedIn. Sold a ditch digging company.
Oh yeah, Phil.
Phil.
Yeah.
And just great guys. It's just down to earth, and just salt of the earth. Love God, and great stories. But how did that come about? And where did all that come into play?
Yeah, we moved around quite a bit because of Boeing. So we California, Chicago, Seattle, and we moved into South Carolina in 2019. But we were fortunate to get connected at Seacoast Church there, and it's an incredible church. It's a mega church, yet it feels small because of the relationships and stuff. And so we just have an incredible group of men that I've connected with for the years that we've been there. And as such, in that through men's Bible study and groups and different coffees and one-on-ones and mentoring sessions, one of the things that we love doing and I love doing is just getting into these YouVersion apps. And Dave, you have just an incredible series of these apps that the more when I discovered them and I started thinking, there's just so much similarity the way you think, the way you lead, that I just resonated with. And I just wanted more of it. And I started, and I have about 100 over 100 guys that are friends on the app here, and they all pop in and out. So there's probably 20, 30, 40 guys that are always doing these apps, if you will, these different devotionals and stuff like that. But reading through one of them, you had your contact information, and I found you through that. And I just needed to say, man, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing, because it's just so powerful, not just for me, but as the men that we're talking with, and just we're all sharing how it's impacting us. And it's just something that here's my story. Like every day I wake up not convinced tomorrow is going to be here. So I just want to make sure what I'm doing today is so intentional that if this was my last day, that I at least take care of business that I'm supposed to do. I live that every day, Dave. It doesn't change. I was with a bunch of young men a couple nights ago, hungry for God, 36 guys got invited to, and listening just pour in. And then a question came up when we just started talking about just life and these things. And I started just pulling out a story even in the book here about how intentionally we can live. And my fear is that there are so many people on the sideline today that aren't taking advantage of who God created them to be because of fear, because of self-doubt, because they gave up. And so my focus is, how do I go change that thinking for people? Mm. And if I can change that thinking for people, that would propel them to be able to do things that they were created to do.
That's powerful. Yeah. Man, I'm so appreciative of you being here. And so somebody wants to connect with you. Yeah. I know the way I connected with you on LinkedIn. Yeah. I know you're, that might be a good place to start if you have some kingdom leaders that want to connect with you as well. And as far as the book, what are some ways that they can grab a hold of this book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, on Audible in about a week here. But when leftturnsgoright.com, you can also go directly to my website and be able to order it directly through there as well.
And Jere, they can just we'll have your name on the screen, the correct spelling, make sure you get that right. But Jere Stille, they can look you up on LinkedIn they can look too. Me up, yeah. Is there any other places where you're active on social media? I know that
those are probably the two. Okay. Yeah, it's just the two places here. I am on Instagram.
Do you travel at all with the right opportunities to give your testimony with the opportunities?
I have made myself available to do that. In fact, I'll just say this is my first opportunity to do so. So thank you. I'm just so honored to be here with you, Dave.
Yeah, I'm honored that we're
able. The subtitle on this for people, it's not only When Left Turns Go Right, but it's finding good when bad things happen. And that's all about a choice. Like, life is full of these incredible left turns that we can determine and think of as bad, but you can find good in almost anything. And it's all really about a choice. You know the story, we all do. Joseph, in Genesis 50:20, years later, and his brothers are like, "We're so sorry.
Yeah,
we're so sorry. We didn't mean it." He's like, "No, but what the enemy meant for bad, God intended for good, for saving many lives." That's what gave birth to this title, When Left Turns Go Right.
Powerful. Jere, hey, thank you so much.
Appreciate you,
man. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that was an incredible interview. We threw the questions out the window early on. I realized that letting Jere tell his story was going to be powerful, and it truly was. I hope that episode was a blessing to you. Make sure you get a copy of his book. I'll see you next time on GC Talk.